All right. Just an aside on CEO pay, which I'll cover somewhat in the readings for this week. There'll be a podcast on it, um, which will kind of show this. So this is new data on CEO pay from Friedman and Sachs, and you could see kind of the explosion. On most of it is in those stock options as the source of the explosion, and kind of that the podcast will kind of cover this some of the things behind the rise in the CEO pay and kind of these weird legal quirks that kind of the podcast suggests led to it, which is it's like kind of shocking when you see these like broad trends, and oftentimes some of the things multi-causal usually, but some of the things leading to it are just like weird legal quirks. Some of the mass incarceration actually driven by that. There's a book by John Pfaff that kind of covers these weird changes, not like big changes, but little things in terms of who prosecutes and who's responsible, how that leads to an increase in incarceration. Okay. Anyways, so just this is just new data that I wanted to present. Okay, back to mergers. So the problem with large firms, and you'll have another reading related to this, another parallel in the present, is monopoly power. And so when there's monopoly power, there is an opportunity for rent seeking. Rent seeking is the term economists use where, essentially value extraction, when you're not really providing anything of value and you're just kind of taking, you're taking some money or resources. And so the issue with monopolies is they use the monopoly power, since they don't have any competitors, to charge higher prices. That's typically the concern, or they have bad customer service. When you think of monopolies in the present, like the cable company, they have bad customer service, or the trash company here, which has the worst customer service that I've been dealing with off and on all day. They can do that because they have a monopoly. There's no credible threat for me in the trash company to say, you know what? Don't need you. I'm going with the other trash company. They have essentially a publicly granted monopoly here. So it's like I'm stuck with the trash company. I can't use the competitive pressure of the market to get lower prices or better service. Okay. Now, all right. So here we go. Trusts. All right. So these large firms, in organizations of firms were called trusts. So they had in this time period, a trust was much more common, which firms would get together and agree on prices. So you had monopolies, you had some monopolies in this time period, and also trusts. Okay, so monopoly power, yes, we covered this. And sometimes the monopoly is because they horizontal integration, or they also use the government to restrict entry. So the way you get a monopoly, so a company's goal is to get a monopoly. If you're a company, you want to have a monopoly because then you could charge higher prices, or you don't have to provide good customer service. So you're trying to get a monopoly. All companies, if they're honest, they would love to have a monopoly. So there's a few different ways you can do it. One is you can advertise and convince consumers that somehow your product is different, even though it's exactly the same as your competitors. There's something special about your product. I mean, this is the purpose of many advertising. So you think of clothing companies like Supreme, it's like, hey, it's just a t-shirt, but when we slap Supreme on it, I don't know if Supreme's still popular, but at one time Supreme was a thing. You slap Supreme on it, and all of a sudden it's this own separate thing, even though it's a t-shirt. A t-shirt's a t-shirt, right? Shoes, the same thing. Is there something special about the Nike logo that makes the shoes different? Okay, the advertising would convince you. So this is a form of monopoly. Only Nike could sell Nike shoes. Only Birkin could sell Birkin bags. I think that's I don't is that a thing? I don't know. Other way you can get a monopoly, as we mentioned before, is through buying up all your competitors. You can also control, so this is horizontal integration. Vertical integration, you can buy up all the resources. So De Beers has a monopoly in diamonds because they own the diamond mines. Now you can also use the government. So you can use licensing. So you can use licensing and regulations that you're adept to deal with. This is what we saw in the pandemic with masks. So it's like there's like tons of regulations around producing N95 masks. And so the companies that have already jumped through those hoops and then asked the government for more hoops, basically, stricter regulations, that's a form of regulatory capture. That's a form of making it difficult for competitors to enter the market. So it was very difficult at the beginning of the pandemic just to set up a company making masks because of there's like a 6-month regulatory process that you have to go through. This is a form of limiting competition. And then just general occupational licensing laws are a form of that. Laws that restrict movement between states is a form of a regulatory capture. And then patents are government granted monopolies to induce innovation. Okay, back to the mergers. So what should we do about the mergers? So the economist answer is, okay, there's always trade-offs. There's like costs and benefits. So the merger may create monopoly power and no cost savings, and all they're doing is raising prices. Well, that's probably a bad thing overall for society. Now, however, if the merger doesn't create significant monopoly power, then there's no reason to stop it. If it's just two companies, I'm buying up my competitors, but there's still ample competition to keep prices down and to make sure I'm held accountable to provide for my customers, then there's no reason to stop that merger. And so it's really hard to tell, like, if there's going to be undue market power. This is a difficult question. And also you can't really see you can't foresee new companies entering as well to compete. So it's just difficult. In practice, the government does this. This is usually a political decision, not an economic decision. So it's usually, if the company is well connected, the merger gets approved. If the company is not, or there's some sort of personal animus between the politicians and the people running the company, then it doesn't get approved. So unfortunately, this is not a technical question. It's usually not a technical question in the present. Okay. So there's no regulations like this. The government doesn't have the power to stop mergers. The government doesn't have the power to stop trust. The government doesn't have the power to stop businessmen getting together and setting prices until 1890 with the Sherman Antitrust Act, where all of a sudden, when people start to become concerned about these large corporations, these large trusts, then the government gives itself the power to regulate these heavy market concentration or these collusion between companies. Okay, so they basically made it illegal to engage in a conspiracy to restrain trade. All right, this would be like price fixing. It also made it illegal to monopolize or attempt to monopolize an industry. And again, there's no formal definition of this. This is more, determined by the courts. Okay, so one of the important cases is when price fixing is ruled illegal. This is where you get together with your competitors and agree to set a price, because competition is basically bad for companies, right? So competition usually happens on price. I'm competing to offer lower and lower prices. Companies don't like this because eats into their profits. So oftentimes companies will get together and say, hey, this is the market price, okay? And so the cartels have no benefits. There's no reason that you would want a cartel. And so the government says you're not allowed to do this. Of course, like everything, Adam Smith foresaw this problem way before everyone else. Famous quote here: people of the same trade seldom meet together, even for merriment and diversion, but the conversation ends in a conspiracy against the public or in some contrivance to raise prices. It's saying when people in the same trade get together, if they do ever get together, it will always end in them saying, hey, you know what? It's like the classic scene in the movie. You and I are not so different. They end up coming together on realizing, hey, let's make a deal to make things better for us. Now, so you have lots of mergers in this period, and it's kind of like similar to today. You have lots of mergers, and the question is, all right, you have a couple different things going on. The mergers are theoretically creating market power, which would translate into price increases for consumers. Now, the mergers also create economies of scale, though. So the mergers are also creating larger companies that are theoretically more efficient, and that would drive prices down. So you have these kind of two effects where the mergers are creating monopoly power, which companies may use to jack up prices. Mergers may create efficiencies, which would drive prices down. So what actually happens? Well, we can just look at the prices, and generally prices are falling. So it seems the efficiency gains, at least in this time period, are outweighing the market power issue. Okay, let's stop there, and then we'll talk about some classic monopoly examples.